Starting by Annette, do you hear me when I speak like this? Great. So my name is Anna Rennermalm and I will tell you all about how to succeed in an interview situation. And I warned plenty of you that this will be quite interactive. I expect you to answer my questions and you are more than welcome to ask me questions. And before I start, I would like to know, hands up anyone who think they have a reliable gut feeling. Okay, anyone? Well, quite a few. And you are scientists. How many of you are rational when making judgments? Quite a lot. How many of you believe that recruitment consultants and recruiting managers are rational in their judgments? Well, a little bit less, I would say. So let's put this to the test. Instead of telling you who I am, you are to tell me who I am. So grab a neighbor and try to answer these questions. Who am I? What's my age, gender, highest education, civil status? Where do I live? Do I have children, pets? How many? What are my hobbies? And if you are really daring, what characterizes me as a person? Okay, a few minutes, go! Okay, yes, let us end there. And I have to ask you, is there any brave soul who dares to guess my age? I'm not easily offended. How old am I? Anyone? Yeah? 35. Okay, someone else? Yeah? 35. Okay, this haircut was good for me. Great. Gender? Female? Yeah, that's actually true. The highest education?
I think master's degree.
Masters, PhD? PhD, okay, some of you read the invitation. Great, I'm a PhD. And I'm 41, by the way, soon to be 42. So last time I asked, everyone thought I was 45. I cut my hair, that was great. Civil status, what do you think? Yeah? In a partnership? Oh, yeah. Married, same guy, 21 years. Where do I live? In Stockholm, yeah. But where in Stockholm? No, not in. I live in Stockholm. But where in Stockholm? Do I live in a flat house or?
In a flat.
Yes! Straight on. Do I have any kids?
2.
Two? Yeah. Boys or girls?
1 boy, 1 girl.
1 boy, 1 girl. Yeah, go for the middle. That's perfect. 4 boys. Hobbies, what do I like to do? Hike, bike, hike? No. Skiing, okay. Yeah, that's good. I seem fit. I'm not. I like to make my own clothes. That's why I put this on. My homemade KI colored dress. And but honestly, did you know that in some studies they have shown what people lie about in their applications, and the next most common lie is your hobbies, because honestly, most of us watch Netflix, right? Me currently rewatching old episodes of Dr. House. Everybody lies. So this is where you should ask me what the most common lie is. The most common lie is that you actually want a job. Anyone dares to guess what I am like as a person? Sorry? Social, yeah. Anyone else?
Kind and friendly.
Kind and friendly. Well, yeah. Very patient. Sorry? Tough? Yeah, pretty much. I'm very outgoing, but actually not very social. I'm kind of introverted. I like to do stuff by myself, but I'm clearly extroverted. That's a very great observation. I like to think that I'm kind, tolerant, not so patient. So, and if I should tell you a bit about my career, why you should listen to me, I was basically born here or across the street. And I spent a great deal of my life here at KI. First as a master's student in the biomedicine research program, later on as a PhD student in clinical bacteriology. I was part of the Postgraduate Students Association board, and in that capacity I was a part of the board of recruitment here at KI, where you recruit all higher academic positions. And after that I started working at what was then called the Career and Recruitment Unit. Now it's two separate units. And I was working with recruitment for academic positions, and I was working with career service for postdocs and junior scientists, a position now held by Annette, and Kerstin came in as my colleague. And 2008 I left to join a recently started company focusing on recruitment within the life science sector. 2 years ago I left that and started my own consultancy firm, and I'm focused in recruiting, finding and assessing specialists with a scientific background. So that's me. And I asked you before about this gut feeling and how rational we are. And most of you did not really believe that you were rational and didn't trust your gut feeling. And I can tell you that some people, of course, have very good gut feeling, but in interview situation, people tend to overuse their gut feeling, and they tend to believe that they make more rational decisions than they do. And if you're interested in this, your own Katarina Gospic, here from KI, done some excellent research and a very easy to read book about gut feeling and rational decisions, or the Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman. So, what I would like to say with this entire stuff that I just performed is that we do get a first impression. And most of the time our impressions will give us quite a good understanding of a person, but in some central aspects we will be wrong. But first impressions last, and this was like a prank to get you all awake. It's not that important, but still, first impressions last, and you will get very different opinions on a person depending on the setting where you meet that person. This is me on my way to a masquerade, 80s team. First almost decent selfie, and on a vacation in Poland. Okay. So you would get very different first impressions from me. But the scope of this session is to talk about the interview, but I also would like to give you a brief overview over a recruitment procedure. In a good recruitment procedure, you know what you are looking for. You start by making a qualifications profile, a job specification, which is the basis for an advertisement, if the position is advertised. You gather applicants in different ways. You interview, maybe you perform tests and analysis. I will tell you a bit more about tests, I hope. I will get time. Take references, negotiate terms, sign the employment, and hopefully do a follow-up of the recruitment process. But I will focus on the interview. But first, what's really the point of an interview? Could you tell me what you think is the point of an interview?
Get to know the person better.
Get to know the person better. Yeah. Anyone else?
Make sure you're not completely crazy.
Make sure you're not completely crazy. Yeah, that's a good summary, really. Making sure the person is not completely crazy, because it's often said that an interview should be a situation where you can give information, get information, and make observations. But honestly, getting and giving information, you can do that in many ways. So an interview situation is both gathering and giving information, but also creating a relationship to ensure that it's not a crazy person. Yeah, really, very much that. So an interview can have a quite good predictive value of a person's future performance if performed right. Unfortunately, how many of you have ever been to an employment interview? most of you, probably at least for your current position. And many of you have seen this interview. It's very nice, it's pleasant, but the interviewer forgot to ask you about yourself. They just talked about themselves all the time. Or they ask you all these tough questions, believing they're hardcore journalists, boom, 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 boom. But a good interview focuses on your competence. It's neutral, it's structured, it has specific questions, it's nice and representative, creating a good basis for a relationship, and also it's informative. Unfortunately, you will, in your life, if you go to many interviews, you will meet interviewers who are unstructured, who ask completely irrelevant questions, and won't give you a proper view of the future job situation. And unfortunately, you will encounter interviews that goes with their gut feelings rather with informed decision. Yeah, common elements in an interview is introduction, where you exchange pleasantries. How do you do? Nice to meet you. Do you wish to have some coffee? You don't need to accept the coffee. I've gotten that question a lot. They will probably ask you questions about your background, your competence, and the terms you are willing to accept, like salary, vacation, working hours, such stuff. I will talk more about competence. What actually is competence? In the next slide. Hopefully, they will give you information about the company, about the position, about future prospects, and they will most likely ask you if you have any questions. So what is competence? Well, to simplify it, competence is really what you actually do and achieve. And the underlying elements of competence is often described as your knowledge, your experience, your cognitive abilities. I'm sorry to break the news, intelligent people perform better. That's the case. Practical abilities, you can't perform small animal brain surgery without steady hands, right? Your personality or typical behavior and your motivation. And you can say like this, that knowledge and experience gives you a track record. It demonstrates what you have done. And if you have a substantial amount of time in the labor market, you can do some extrapolation on what you can achieve. But to understand a person's future potential, the future results, it's more these factors that's taken into account, because it's what you actually do and how you learn and adapt to the situation that describes your potential. Hence all the questions about your personality. So, I got this question about the international perspective. These are common elements in an interview, and I think that is quite international. There are different laws in different countries, but in most of the world it's forbidden to discriminate people, for instance. And if you are to apply for a position outside Sweden, I would recommend you to do some reading. Google, borrow a book or buy a book about the culture in that specific country. I will focus mainly on Sweden, but most of the things that's true for Sweden is also true for other countries. Sweden is quite informal. We don't take clothing into very high account. We say hi, who are you? We don't address each other as Mr. Professor, but with you, etc. So Sweden is a bit more informal than in many other countries. And that should be considered if you meet recruiting managers or other people from different countries, like Great Britain, for instance. They are much more formal than we are here in Sweden. which should also be taken into account when it comes to how you dress. You could always ask in advance about a specific dress code. In academia, you all know about the academic culture. It's always people with messy hair and clothes, the absent-minded genius, makeup all over her face. Oh, well, wrong gender stereotype. But I strongly remember when I was doing my PhD and we had a laboratory assistant in for an interview, and he came with a black suit, white shirt and a tie. Well, he got a job, but we thought it was a little bit funny because it was often his dress code, and he kept wearing that suit for days after he got a job as well. And it was no problem, but you can always ask for a dress code. So when you are called for an interview, because as I said, this topic of this seminar is about the interview. So you get an invitation for the interview. Make sure that you have all the information you need on when you should meet, where you should meet, why, who, what, how, all these things, so you know how to get there. There are some big no-nos for an interview. One of the biggest are be late. You should not be late for an interview, never, ever, unless you died. But if you do that, call in advance. And you should reread the advertisement, if there is anyone. What does it really say? An ad can be viewed as a long question. And the entire purpose of the interview is for you to answer that question. Take a look at the qualification profile. What do they actually ask for? And how are your merits corresponding to that? And also read about the position. Take a look at the web page. What does it say about the company? When I meet new clients, I always check them out on LinkedIn or Google. And find out where you match for this position and where you don't. And when you reread an advertisement, you will realize it raises a lot of questions. What do they really mean? Write them down. Write them down. Use them, because you should have questions for the interviewer. And bring with you your papers, your proof of highest education. If you have letters of recommendation, bring them. I have to ask you, how many of you have written letters of recommendation?
For someone else, do you mean?
No, that was my follow-up question. How many have written recommendation letters for yourself? Yeah, me too. So I don't take recommendation letters into very high account, but some people do. Bring them with you. And check your letter of recommendation so it's actually a good recommendation letter. And this is, if you have recommendation letters, take a look, and if it says in the bottom, this and only this, we wish blah, 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 good luck. It's a bad reference. So take a look. It should say, we give our very best recommendations. And if it's not, ask your former supervisor or manager to rewrite it for you. And reread your application as well. Bring the application with you, bring the ad with you, and other documents that might strengthen your application. And pen and paper. I surprisingly often get this question, could you actually bring a pen and paper to an interview? Yes, you can. It's a meeting. And if you're really smart, you have written down your questions on that specific paper that you're bringing with you. Because in the end, when they ask you, do you have any questions? Not only do you remember them, but if the interviewer already answered all your questions, you can say, well, I'll take a look. And then they at least see that you prepared. Because I've been in a situation where candidates have been asked, do you have any questions? And they think, I had, but I already gotten the answer. So they say no. And then my client gets back to me and says, well, this person didn't seem very interested. He or she didn't have any questions for me. Okay, so how many of you would be completely confident in interviewing your first employee, sorry. How many would feel confident performing an interview with your first employee? Yeah, some of you, that's great. Most of you not. And try to pretend that you're on the other side, that you are the interviewer, and it feels a bit scary. For me, I run my own consultancy firm. People tell me I should hire. I mean, I'm an expert in finding and assessing people. But I still find it a bit scary because, you know, it's my money, it's my time, it's my reputation that's on stake when I'm supposed to employ someone. And it's the same thing for everyone who's employing. So, imagine yourself on the other side and make sure you help the interviewer by coming prepared, answer the actual questions, try to be a bit brief and be ready for follow-up questions. So, when you get this question, can you tell me a bit more about yourself? Think about the advertisement and bring your elevator pitch, the small summary of yourself that's short enough to be presented on an elevator ride. It's not your life story. You should be able to elaborate and answer follow-up questions, but be a bit brief. And have real examples. Be prepared to give real examples, and I will elaborate on this in a while. And also remember, they might be poor interviewers, but they can also be great co-workers and managers. Use the internet. Google the company. Yeah, I told you this already. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so you have to think about who are you really? Who are you? Because that's what they want to find out during the interview, and that's a tricky thing. The easiest way to find out is to ask someone you trust, what do you think defines me at work? And be prepared, and don't hit the other person in the head because they are wrong. And also, think about this first impression that I told you about, because the first impression lasts. And looks do matter, but there are certain things that matters even more than looks for a first impression in the Western world. Do you know what most people defines the first impression when they meet a candidate? Do you know what factors? Smile, yes, one. Eye contact, second. Handshake, yes! You got it. It's the handshake, smile, and eye contact. Are you the limp fish? Are you the bone cracker? Or do you have a decent handshake? Do you have a smile and eye contact? Try it on your neighbor. So, and maybe your neighbor isn't really comfortable in giving you feedback, so try this at home. Because if you have the limp fish handshake, people will think that you are a lack of energy. So try it at home with someone you trust. Ask them to give you honest feedback. Do you have the limp fish handshake?
Scary.
Yeah, it's scary. Scary, says Kerstin. Yeah. Many people think so. But also, some specific preparations. These are among the 10th most common questions in an interview situation. What can you tell me about yourself? And the answer to that is, as I told you, be a bit brief and focus on what's relevant for the job. And list your strengths. I told you, ask someone, ask a trusted coworker, because it's who you are at work that really matters, not your private life. And you should be able to answer, how are these your strengths? Almost everyone I interview replies in the same way. Well, I'm very positive, hardworking. I work very well in teams, but also good independently. I'm flexible, but not afraid to speak my mind, blah, blah. So my follow-up question is always, how does it show that you are positive? A bit trickier, right? So you have to be able to give examples on why you describe yourself in a certain way. And there's actually an interview technique called STAR. That's an acronym for situation, task, action, and result. And if I ask you about your positive attitude, you should be able to tell me about the situation where this attitude was displayed, what you were to do, what you did, and what the result was. And that's also when it comes to your technical expertise. Weaknesses. Yeah, and when it comes to strength, be honest. When I applied to my job that Annette has now, I misspelled the word conscientiousness, as what is called noggrann. Vad heter noggrann på engelska? Sorry?
Conscientiousness.
Yeah, conscientiousness. I misspelled it. I'm very detail-oriented, misspelling detail-oriented. And luckily for me, my manager didn't see that, but it should be true strengths. And the same thing with weaknesses, it should be your true weaknesses. And exactly as with strength, you should have examples on why they are weaknesses and what you are doing to minimize the effect of your weaknesses. And that's tricky and needs some introspection. Why should I consider hiring you? Once again, you did your homework, you studied the ad, and did the matching yourself in advance. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? And I have a word of warning here for all of you with a very high education, looking for a job with less qualification demands. Don't say, oh, I will use this job as a stepping stone for a higher position within the company. I've heard that so many times. The employer wants someone who's going to stay for a while, who actually will thrive at that position. So avoid saying that, unless it's so true and you just need to get it out of your system. Instead, describe what you will learn from this position and what you hope to do in a long term. Why do you want to work here? Once again, if you study the company, the people working there, the tasks, you should be able to answer that question. Your salary expectation, that's tricky, but you can give them a span. You should be able to have an answer. Check with the union, check salary statistics if you need. If you don't have any salary requirements whatsoever, be also prepared to get a very, very low offer. I've been in this situation so many times. People coming out for their first job outside academia and they say, well, I don't have any salary expectations. I'm willing to take any salary. And that's most of the time simply not true. Yes?
Should we give like a range or should we be fixed? Like, okay, this is what I expect. 38 is what I expect. Or between 35 and 40.
Okay, the question was, should we give a range, a salary range, or a specific number? It depends on where in the process you are. Early on, maybe even before you even heard about the details of the position, you can give a span. I think you can give a salary span. And later on, you should be able to have a fixed sum. But a span is good enough because what people want to know early on in a process is if you have like 20,000 kronor a month or 150,000 kronor a month. That's a big difference. Or if you're somewhere in the middle, most people are. What motivates you to make a good job? Also a common question. Yes, sorry?
Sorry, I had a question about the salary.
Yes?
Do people actually negotiate their salaries anymore?
Yes?
Because in my experience, I've never had that happen.
Yeah.
I've always said this is the wage you'll be paid, and that's what you get. But
Yeah, do people really negotiate salary anymore? Was the question. Yes, they do. Most of the time you will get a specific offer, but people do negotiate salaries, and they negotiate vacation days, they negotiate working hours, pension terms, etc. So often there is some room for negotiation. But let's say you are to be recruited in a position in a company where 10 people are doing the same thing. The room for negotiation will be very, very small because there is a salary structure at the site, and they can't deviate from that very much because that wouldn't be fair to the current employers, right? But many times you can have some negotiation anyway. Yeah?
I also have a question for the salary expectation. I was asked by a recruiter asking about my salary expectation. I said I didn't have any fixed number in mind. But then I was further asked about my current situation.
Yes.
So I gave a range of my current situation, not exact numbers. I said it's around 30,000.
Yes.
And would that influence a lot on my later on negotiation for salary?
The question was, if someone asks you about your current salary and you answer that question, will it affect the salary offer? Well, first of all, I need to comment that question because I think it's quite common that prospective employers ask for your current salary, and I think they really don't have anything to do with your current salary, but people tend to ask that anyway. And you told me that you gave them, well, I earn something like this. That's a good answer, I think. And yes, probably it will affect what salary they will give you, but also they want to make sure that you are willing to accept a salary level they have thought out in advance. So if your current salary were higher than what they are willing to offer, that will influence more than the other way around. Because most of the time, people have a salary in mind and they will keep into this range because they actually do want to give you a fair salary. Was that an answer to your question? Yeah?
Should you refuse that question? Because I've heard other people say that you should refuse that question politely, and maybe how would you go about that?
Well, I would prefer to give an, yes, could you refuse that question about your current salary? I don't think you're obliged to respond to that question, and you can easily avoid it by having a salary expectation instead. I have come to learn that the power of 3, if someone asks you the same stupid question several times, you just repeat your message, like, well, I expect a salary between this and this. Okay, what do you earn today? Well, I expect a salary around this and this, and sometimes they have to grow tired of their own question. So I think you can, but you need to have a salary expectation ready. But yeah. Salary is interesting. Yep, good time. And then this one, what makes you a good team player? Once again, ask your coworkers, what makes you a good team player? Maybe you're a very poor team player. Then you can say, well, I work best independently. But is there anything that you would like to ask me? Prepare 3 to 5 questions in advance. That's appropriate amount. And keep these questions about, in a first meeting, keep these questions about the company, the position, the culture of the company. Don't ask for health benefits, salary level, vacation days, etc. the first meeting. And why not? You don't want to start a negotiation immediately. And this is psychology, because if you invest time in something, you will like it to be good, because you have invested time in something and you would like it to be good. It's like in the car business, they have something called after-sales marketing. So a lot of car companies, marketing money, goes to making the buyers actually feel happy about the car they already bought. So if you make the employer spend time with you before you negotiate, they are more willing to give you what you want. But that's a higher level of negotiation. There are some questions that are trickier than others. Some completely ridiculous questions, like how could you use a meatball or a brick? And that's some not at all scientific test on your creativity, just so you know. Do you plan to get children? That's a tricky question. I mean, how can you know if you're going to get children or not? No one knows. As I said, I'm 41, soon to be 42. I have experienced so many friends of mine who they can't get children. What should they answer that question? Do you plan to get children? It's not illegal to ask about anything here in Sweden. In other countries it might be so, but it's illegal to discriminate people based on their gender, transgender expression, sexual orientation, age, ethnicity, religion, or disabilities. But these discriminating questions might pop up, and I don't think you don't have to answer these questions. And you can also think about, if you know that you will be likely to get questions like that, think of a good answer. Like, when it comes to children, well, I don't know about the future yet. It's very vague, but still. Or if you get other questions that you feel can be discriminating, you can always ask politely, oh, why do you want to know? Most of the time people ask these kinds of questions because they want to know something about you as a person. Most of the time it's completely irrelevant for the position. But they give people a false confidence in that they can somehow get to know you and predict your future work. It's not necessarily discrimination involved, but it can feel like it. There are some things you should avoid during an interview situation. I told you the first one, never ever be late. I know people, if someone is 1 minute late for a meeting, they cross them out of their contact book. They think it's so rude to be late. Never lie to get a job. You might get a job, but you will end up with very poor references. I think you all know such people who have lied to get a job. Won't talk much about that now. Name dropping, avoid name dropping. It happens to me all the time when I interview people that they drop names. I worked with this professor and that professor, I co-worked with that, blah, 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 blah. I have no idea who they're talking about. And honestly, it makes me feel a bit stupid. And I'm a recruitment consultant, I can handle it. But be a little bit careful with the name dropping. And don't brag too much. Make sure you smell all right. I had a candidate who constantly farted during our interview. And I had a friend of me telling me that she needed to pee desperately during the interview. So she was like, yes, yes, of course, to all questions. And she didn't get a job. So if you need to use the bathroom, ask for that. And as I said, try to be a bit brief and concise when you answer questions. Don't talk their ears off. Don't trash talk your former workplace. If you are dissatisfied with your job and they're asking you, why do you want to change jobs? You tell them what you miss in your job and turn it into something positive, like, I would like more of this and this and this. Don't trash talk your former employer. Tell the truth. Talk about you. Yeah. Tell them what you want. What you should use with caution is ask about these petty things, minor things. People ask me about the Swedish phenomena called friskvårdsbidrag. That's the yearly sum you get for going to the gym or swimming, etc. It's like 1,000 kronor a year. It's nothing. Don't spend your time with that. When you are asking questions, try to be quite specific. Can you tell me more about the position? That's a very unspecific question. Try to be a little bit more specific. Help the interviewer. When you're talking to someone who spent the last 20 years in trying to learn the basics of certain methods, don't say, "Oh, I'm a fast learner. I will learn this in a couple of weeks," because that's really rude and naive. If you're a fast learner, do say so, but not when it comes to, don't diminish the capacity of the person interviewing you, because, as I said, in that area of expertise, they might still feel that they have so much more to learn, and you say you can learn it in a couple of weeks. One thing that's a bit controversial, if someone is looking for a project manager, tell them how you worked with project management or other specific competencies, because you can mean completely different things. Some industrial project managers are running large-scale projects where they are asking for resources, managing a whole team of specialists, etc. So when they ask you about your experience from project management, tell them what kind of experience you have. Also, once again, don't underestimate the complexity of the role you're applying for. And I told you, don't say that this is a good way into the company. If you don't want the position, don't apply to it. A little bit about tests. There are bad tests that won't work, and there are actually good tests that have a great predictive value. Today, it's more and more common that you are, even before the interview, they make you to perform a so-called screening test. So you have to answer questionnaires. It can be straight-up tests trying to evaluate some of your cognitive capacities, or it may be some personality questionnaire. And why people are using this as screening, as a screening method when they expect many applicants is because it actually works. Granted that they are knowing that they've done their job specifications, so they actually know what kind of person they are looking for. That's not very common, unfortunately. But I told you that the cognitive abilities and your personality gives a prediction on your future results. So that's why screening is performed. But I think you should always get information about the tests. You should always get feedback and opportunity to comment. If you put a lot of time and effort into applying for a position, they should give you the same courtesy back. And sometimes these tests come later in a recruitment process, often coupled with an interview. It's a part of the selection process. So you can have a bad performance on the test. You can be the wrong kind of person for a specific position. But you can't be wrong as a person. It's just not possible. Who can be wrong as a person? It's all about being in the right setting. And there are tests that measure your skills, your personality, your motivation. And it's, as I said, a tool to predict behavior. You're never right or wrong as a person. And if you don't match the position, it's nothing wrong with you. It's this specific position that might not be a match for you. But you should be able to get feedback and comment the result, because none of these instruments are waterproof. And another thing, many of these tests are, in many of these you have the ability to choose in which language you will answer the questions. Use your best language. Don't use Swedish if you're not good at it, just trying to impress with your Swedish skills. It's not your language skills that's measured here. It's your personality and your abilities. And if you answer in your language, you will come out in a truer version. Yeah, and there's one thing in common for all my clients, only one thing, that everyone is looking for. Do you know what it is? Any ideas? Yeah?
They want to get the job.
Yeah, they want someone who wants to get the job. And I told you, this is the most common lie in applications, that people want a job. And still, this is what my clients always want. They want someone who wants this specific position at this specific place. The last impression also lasts. So if you, after an interview, feel that this was a great job, a great opportunity, and you really want a job, say it. Like, thank you for a very nice interview. After talking to you about the company and the position, I'm even more interested in this job. Also, I have had candidates who said this, candidates who didn't say this, and my clients, the employers, they notice, they do notice. Finally, you should get a job you want. You should get a job where they want you. So in that aspect, you cannot fail if you come prepared. Because if you didn't get a job, it's either because someone else was more qualified, or it just wasn't a match. Did it go south? Did the interview go wrong? It's just a meeting. It's hard to change a first impression, but you can. You can try to get it right. You can actually call people, say, oh, I feel I didn't come out right in the interview, and I would like to add this and this and this. Might not help you, but on the other hand, it might. You can always try to get a second chance. Sometimes you will get this second chance.
Can I ask a question?
Yes?
How important is it to call the company or the boss of that company when you've applied for a job there? And how important is it to show this interest that everyone is talking about, call and
Yeah.
show that you're interested?
Yeah, how important is it to call and show your interest after you sent the application? Was that the question?
Yes.
Before the interview?
The interview, before they choose any candidates.
I would do it the other way around. Call before you send in the application, because then you will know what to address. If you read the ad properly, you will have some relevant questions, and you can adjust your CV and your letter according to what's really important for the employer. Not everyone is great in writing ads, and you try to make it short and attractive, so some information won't be there. If you call in advance, you know how to tailor your application to please the employer. And so you should call in advance. And when your application has been there for like 2 weeks, call again. Just wanted to follow up, see that you received my application. See if it was clear to you. And when they say, well, we're early in the selection process, you say, okay, thank you very much, then I'll await your response. Because it's much better to call in advance. But you could call after a while, but not only to show your interest. Because honestly, I applied for a job once with a police authority. They wanted to hire an investigator with an academic degree, with a research background, preferably. So I applied, thought this was very interesting. I could work with the police. 4,000 candidates applied. They could have been a bit clearer in their ad, right? But they would have hated it if everyone called just to show their interest. Hello, I'm really interested. get lost. So if you're calling, make sure it's because you have relevant questions. And if you didn't get a confirmation note that they actually received your application, you can always call to make sure that they received the application. So, any final questions? Yeah?
My friend's an immunologist, and she spent most of her time trying to get into this top national job, the highest research agency in my country. She got the job, and she spent 6 months there, but she found out that she really hated the position and she left.
Yeah.
What on earth would you do if you're in that situation and you had a bad experience and then you're at the interview and you're feeling really like, oh wow, you know, what are they going to ask about my immediate prior position and it wasn't good? What advice would you give there?
Yeah, okay, the question is, if you had a bad experience at your previous job, it didn't turn up as you expected, and at the next job interview, they ask you about that previous experience. Well, there might be many situations why there are things you are not so happy to talk about in an interview. It might be that you have been sick. It might be that you have a prolonged period of unemployment. It might be so that you didn't at all agree with your former boss and are afraid of bad references. Maybe your last job just wasn't the right match for you and you didn't succeed. There are so many things that could happen to you in your career, and the answer is always the same. Think about, before you go to next interview, why did it fail? What was your part in all of it? And what are your strategies to make sure to minimize the risk of that happening again? Because what you have learned, if you learned anything from that experience, you will have learned how to avoid unnecessary problems, and that made you grow as a person. That makes you a safer bet to employ. Because as I told you when I talked about weaknesses, if you know your weaknesses and how to counteract them, you show insight, and that's a good thing. And it's the same thing with not so great experience in your past. Was that a good enough answer?
Yeah.
Mm? Well, the final question. Yeah?
Question, because sometimes they have to interview several people.
Yes?
But they actually have already one candidate they're really interested in. How can you figure out if you're a real candidate or just a bystander?
Okay. So the question was, sometimes people do have a recruitment process, interviewing several candidates, but actually they have one specific candidate in mind. So this is all for show. How do you make sure that that's not the situation? Well, that's highly unethical to do it like that, I think. I think if you call someone in for an interview, you should give that person a decent chance. And I don't think there's any great way of avoiding that situation. And actually, there are times where they do have a candidate in mind, but are convinced otherwise by meeting the other candidates. So sometimes people actually do change their mind. They thought of someone specific, but realize in the process that's a better person out there. So I don't think there's any easy way to avoid that. It's poor ethics. But in the end, you have to trust that people do this for a reason. So let's keep in touch. This is my company name until Thursday. I changed name, search for S, as in staff scientist specialist. But you will find me on LinkedIn. Do link in to me. I love LinkedIn. It's where I find most of my candidates. So all search recruitment consultants use LinkedIn. So if you're not in LinkedIn, get in LinkedIn and contact me. Okay, thank you very much. You've been an excellent audience.